Okay, well, I think it's time to get going again.
Yeah, I think we're ready.
By the way, we've got 46 people on, and I think that must be, if not a record, it's about a record. So you're certainly pulling the crowds in.
Hello, 46 people. So I think we're going to try and use some of the pictures from the website today. So the Trust has a website. It's darnall.org.uk. If you're interested. Sorry about the grammar and the spelling, I wrote it all. But there's a lot of pictures on there to the point where my host keeps complaining about how many pictures there are. I grew up particularly when I was at university and I got access to the internet for the first time. I had a wonderful time reading the Barry Hughes website, Isengard, about the Welsh Highland Railway, and also the University of Bangor website. Unfortunately, both the webmasters of those websites are now sadly not with us. But they were very comprehensive and photo-rich records of things that were happening in real time, like history unfolding before my eyes, and they were both about the renewal, the revival of the Welsh Highland Railway, which captured my imagination in a way that I don't think anything else really had. The idea of these huge locomotives on this ridiculously small gauge was just so unbelievably captivating for me, and quite a formative image. So I've modelled the website after those. I've put in the sort of content that I liked to see. So we're going to start. We're going to go through the locomotives and rolling stock in order of purchase, and I'm going to just give like a little bit of a potted history of them, as much as I can. So hopefully you guys are able to see the web browser on the screen now. It should be just here, and so we're going to start with the Coferna. So I think really my first piece of advice, if you're going to buy a locomotive, is don't buy a Coferna. They're really bad in pretty much every way that you can imagine. So Coferna were a shipbuilder and happy recipient of French government grant money. That was really their stock in trade, was taking money from the French taxpayer and spending it on keeping people employed, really. And I could be doing them a disservice there, but from what I can gather, that's pretty much how it worked. So there's a small number of narrow gauge Coferna locomotives that's still in existence as far as we're concerned. There possibly is some in various French colonies, but really nobody bought a Coferna by choice. You bought a Coferna because someone bought it for you, a bit like getting a Sierra in the 80s, like, your employer gave you one, no one actually went to the Ford dealer and bought one. So these things, maybe not so great from a quality point of view, but it was what I could get at the time, and it was a pretty little locomotive, and I quite liked it. So we can see a builder's photo on screen right now. This isn't the locomotive that I bought, but it's a catalogue image of a locomotive that was very, very, very similar. So these things came in different sizes. You can buy this one, which is the smallest one, which is a 5-ton ballasted locomotive, and this thing will fit through a normal doorway. So if you have a normal industrial doorway that you would have in your factory, this thing will go through it. It's only about 2 foot 6 inches wide. It's designed to be as powerful as possible and as small as possible. And I kind of liked that about it, but I also wanted to be able to see around things that I was shunting. So if I was going backwards, I wanted to be able to see around stuff. So I thought I'll buy this thing and I'll make it a little bit wider. And then if you're driving it, you can look around stuff and it'll work quite well. So we're just going to scroll down to the bottom of the page here so we can get down to the bit where we have all the pictures, or I am if I don't lose the mouse. Hold on, I've got to find the buttons as well. My apologies, I'm not as bad at this as I appear. So, apologies. So this is the locomotive. Hopefully you can see this in like a large enough picture, but this is the locomotive when I first saw it. It had a beautiful, absolutely gigantic single-cylinder engine, which was hilariously solidly mounted to the frame. I don't know what level of sociopathic tendencies you would have to do that to the driver of the locomotive, but presumably they weren't union. This thing here is the flywheel, and I used a 1.5 ton capacity crane to lift that flywheel, and it struggled. So that's a big flywheel. I believe, as far as I can tell from what I found when I took it apart, because there's no history of this thing whatsoever, that it's basically a Franco-Swiss tractor. So the engine and gearbox combination, like an off-the-shelf industrial combination that you could buy, and it was set up mostly for use in a tractor. Manual gearbox, 3-speed, 2 directions, and it has space for axles and a power takeoff like you would have in a tractor. But in this case, they had, instead of having axles on it, they'd connected 2 sprockets, 2 drive sprockets to it, to turn it into a railway locomotive. And this had one going forwards and one going backwards, one to each axle. And that's the builder's plate on the diesel engine that was in it. Absolutely beautiful thing. Unfortunately, a gigantic paperweight by the time it got to me. It has a vertical stack, and that had been left outside for 60 years with predictable results. So this thing had one interesting thing about it when I got it, which is it had a massive acid burn on one end. So it had something extremely corrosive spilt over it, which had then been painted over, and you could tell from the paint layers in its original occupation. So wherever it worked, 1, really bad workplace safety, 2, handled corrosive materials. Outside that, no idea what it did for a living. All that we know is it turned up at Stoom Centrum in Belgium in the 80s. The guy who owned it was a little bit eccentric, kind of not unusual, and everybody fell out with him, so they pushed all this stuff outside and said, look mate, jog on, and eventually it ended up in the UK. So this is it arriving in Sheffield on a sunny day where I had no idea what was going to happen to me in the future, and it got delivered to my workshop where I work, and I started taking it apart, and I thought, this is going to be quick and easy. This isn't going to take long at all. I've got everything I need here. It's just like doing an old car. I've done a number of vintage cars before. Nothing particularly difficult. And there isn't anything particularly difficult about it, as long as you leave it alone and don't try and make it better. And it's like the Festinio curse. Whenever they get a diesel locomotive or a steam locomotive, they're like, I can make this better. Don't make it better, just make it work. But history shows that that's not how the human mind works. So here's the engine removed from the locomotive. It's quite a sizable piece of kit. It's a power pack, so cooling system, engine, flywheel, all in one lump. And somewhere we have the gearbox. So this is again a beautiful piece of engineering, full of water, basically a paperweight. But you can see this is where you had the option to take off power, and then the sprockets down here, bell housing, and the gearbox over there. And that is the clutch pedal. Which must have been an exciting adventure to use. I guess you had to be of a certain weight before you could actually use the clutch in this thing, otherwise it would just fire you out at the top. And you can see how narrow the locomotive is. So it went through like a strip down procedure. We started taking it apart, cleaning it up, and I realised that the engine was toast and it wasn't going anywhere. So I ordered some steel to make it wider. I've welded a lot. I like welding. I'm a qualified welder. Never welded something 50 millimeters thick. So that was quite an adventure. So this is me making the buffer beam wider with some 50 mil thick steel. And I did this on my own. I'm not a particularly strong lady. So moving this stuff about was an adventure, and I nearly killed myself on a number of occasions. And I had to fill this entire gap 4 times with weld. Don't do that, it's a bad idea. But you can see the weld prep there. And then I went on eBay, the home of all things that are happy, and bought myself a new power pack for it. So this is a Deutz 3-cylinder engine. This is an Austro Deutz, so it's partially made by Steyr, who military vehicle fans might know as the maker of various 4x4 and 6x6 military vehicles, Putsch, Haflinger, that type of thing. They specialise in contracted out, unusual engineering things for larger companies, a bit like Ricardo do in the UK. And then this engine was licensed to China for production there. The Chinese stole the design, stopped paying the license fees, and just started cranking these things out. This one was a fire pump at an office building in London, and it was never used. It has something like 3 hours on it, something like that. And it's like a 70 horsepower engine, so quite powerful in comparison to the engine that was in there, but quite a lot higher revving, because if you tried to rev the one that was in there to 700 RPM, it would have gone into orbit. But yeah, quite a nice little thing. Runs beautifully, very, very clean, really nice. And then it occurred to me that I had no idea how to get the power from the engine to the wheels because the gearbox was just completely toast. And so at that point I spoke to Patrick Keefe and I said, I haven't really got any money. Can you do this engine for me? And Patrick was like, you're an idiot. And I was like, yeah, can you do it anyway? And he was like, yeah. So that's where we got to. We started thinking about what we wanted it to look like. I had a look at a lot of other Coferna designs from the same period because they made some horrific standard gauge stuff and some horrific meter gauge stuff. And we sort of picked out the aesthetic things, the design DNA that made a Coferna look like a Coferna, which is a droopy rain gutter on the side of the bonnets, rolled top on both bonnets, a centre cab but slightly offset to one end, that sort of thing. I managed to find, somewhat weirdly, I lived in France for a little bit, my French is pretty good. I managed to find a set of 2 different pairs of Marshall SNCF headlights on Salonce, a French classifieds website, and got them sent to the UK. They're absolutely beautiful. They're like a veteran car headlight. They're huge. So I got those for it. And then the Festino Railway very kindly did a little bit of design work on the draw gear for me because it had very pretty but unfortunately very broken draw gear before. So it's they designed a set of standard FR draw gear for it. We serviced the engine, got it running. This is, by the way, all on the website, so you can go back and look at these later if you want to, because I'm going to skip over a vast majority of it because there's so much of it. And I started learning a lot about engineering on this scale, and this is quite a manageable locomotive. It is only 5 tons. It's about the size of a Quarry Hunslet. But I learned about the joy of mag drills, about the need to have a very large 3-phase welder, and generally had a wonderful time in the evenings after work, putting bits back on this, learning to cut with oxyacetylene. I'd never done that before. All sorts of things that I'd read about, but I'd never really done. So yeah, and then we got to this sort of stage. So I sent it away to be shot blasted, and made a very useful contact, a company called Broadblast here in Sheffield, who were very sympathetic and kind of used to me just turning up with like really weird stuff. And generally being quite nice about it, which is really nice of them. So we got it to this stage. It started to look really nice. I started to, I like a good Google, so I started to find a load of people who did things for French locomotives. All French locomotives have these flag holders on them. I'm not going to make a joke about the French and flags, but they do. So I got some of those. They look really nice. Chose all the colours. I had all the colours colour matched by Craftmaster Paints, who again have been very kind to me and very understanding of my stupid requests. So these are all SNCF colours. You can now order these from Craftmaster if you ever want to paint a French Pacific locomotive or anything like that. You can now order SNCF colours from Craftmaster. And then we start to get to the design stage. So this is what the locomotive is going to look like when it's finished. And then I was really enjoying myself, and I thought, this is great. Nothing can stop me now. This is fantastic. So you know, it's obviously going to be done in like a fortnight here. We can tell that progress is really, really good. The colours are perfect. The couplings are on. It's fantastic. So I got it to the stage where the wheels are back in, which we'll get to in a moment, hopefully. Where are we? So yeah, we got to this sort of stage. And then it became necessary to send it away so it could have a transmission installed. So I decided to have a hydraulic transmission in honour of my Lima Western model when I was little. You know, who doesn't like those? And it's basically a forklift setup. Keith specialised in at the time, and they were very kind to take the project on. And then when it got down there and they started doing that, I thought, do you know what? I haven't really got time to do the body work. I can do it, but like I just can't really justify it. I just saw a picture of it being towed by my at the time rather decrepit Golf. So then we decided to just let Keith deal with the rest of the locomotive, because I'd already got other things on the go by this point. So they've been in charge of doing the rest of the metal work on it, which you can see progressing quite rapidly in these pictures as they fly past. This is it at Darnall 50th anniversary open day. So it's got quite a lot wider. It's got its steps on it. And then this is the wooden mock-up of the cab, and this takes us up to July this year, terrifyingly. And then Keith's I've worked on it some more since then. They put in at my request an American-style control cab, so I learnt to drive diesels in American-manufactured locomotives, and I'm used to the way that American controls are set out, and I wanted it to suit me rather than anybody else. So it's set up as you would in, it's actually the wrong way round because it's left-hand drive, but it's set up as you would set up something like an Locomotive GP40, something like that, if you like that type of business, with a American Association of Railroad style control stand, which is adapted to work with the Coferna. And then this sort of takes us up to pretty much present day. These are the windows. This is the internal fabrication in the cab. And I hope you can all see this. I hope it's big enough on your screens. And this is what it looks like right now. So this is where we are at the moment. It is the Smoky Joe of diesel locomotives. It's very short, it's very fat, and it's quite tall for its proportions, but utterly charming and very good at what it does. And that, budget depending and depending on what happens in the industry, because there's a lot of change happening right now, I'm hoping for this to be done sometime in the coming year. That would be very nice. So that's the Coferna. That was going to be the only locomotive I ever bought, which is why I spent so much time designing it and making sure it was how I wanted it to be. And a locomotive, as we all know, is no good without a carriage. So we'll move on to the Gym Palace. Now, the Gym Palace is kind of fun, and it's brought a lot of joy to a lot of people. It's brought a lot of stress to my accountant, but a lot of people have been very happy about it, and particularly the people who've worked on it, because I'm not the only person who's worked on this. And it's become quite a large project in a way that I never really expected it to be. It kind of got a little bit out of control. I don't know if anyone's familiar with like the Ministry of Defence's attempts to procure a Special Forces Chinook, but if you get bored, read about it. It was once described by the House of Commons Select Committee for Defence Procurement as a gold standard cock-up. This suffered from function creep in a way that you really shouldn't allow to happen, particularly if it's your money that you're spending. But whatever, anyway, we're here now, aren't we? And we can't do anything about it. So this is the Gym Palace. And I always had an idea of the sort of carriage that I really liked, the carriage that I really wanted. And a lot of this came from watching a film when I was little, the name of which completely escapes me. I should probably have looked up beforehand, which was about, I want to say it was Douglas Bader, and we'll call him that because I don't know the actor's name, and as far as I'm concerned, he is Douglas Bader, in the same way that Captain Kirk is Captain Kirk, even when he's in TJ Hooker. He's in India. They've got to move an Indian prince from one bit of the Raj to another bit of the Raj, and they do it on a train that is definitely not a meter gauge train in Spain. And they have this wonderful carriage that they do it on, and it's absolutely beautiful. I adore it. I love the atmosphere of it, the wooden shutters, the balconies, everything about it's just wonderful. So I looked around for carriages that were like that I could just rip off, basically, because I haven't got an original bone in my body. And I came across this thing. Now this is, I'm not going to try and pronounce it. It's from an Irish 3-foot gauge railway. You should all be able to see the name of the railway there. All my family are Irish. I'm not going to butcher that because I've never been. This is quite an interesting carriage. It's very pretty. It was designed by an insane person who'd never been to Ireland, had no idea what the local conditions were like. So it's open at the ends for a start. But that in itself wasn't a massive problem. The problem was that patrons on the evening trains, when they'd been out of work for a few hours, would sometimes fall off because they'd been somewhere in between work and going home. And that rendered them incapable of holding onto the railway carriage all the way back to the station. And a couple of people got injured doing that, so they ended up actually boxing these in and turning them into a far less interesting carriage, or according to Boyd anyway. Take Boyd's word for it if you want to. And I found out that Jeremy at the Richmond Light Railway had built a version of this carriage, and I didn't know Jeremy at the time, so I went all the way down to Richmond for an open day, and I took about 300 pictures of this carriage, which there's a lot of really confused people in the pictures who are like, why is this woman just taking like 30 pictures of me and my son. And you know, I guess they were scared, but whatever. So I got the pictures that I needed and brought them home, and then I gave them to the designer at Keith's, and I said, "Can I have one of these, please?" And he said, "No, don't be an idiot. It's not the same size as the Carriage chassis that you've bought." And I was like, "Oh." And so I went back and I got a very large angle grinder, and I cut the chassis in two, and I thought, it's going to go one of two ways at this point. So let's go down to the bottom of the page. We'll see a little bit of progress on the Carriage from its inception to where we are right now. This is I think probably my favourite project, and it's the one that's sort of I've enjoyed the most because it's been very creative and it's allowed me to make something that otherwise wouldn't have existed. Like, you can go to the Welsh Island Railway, you can go to South Africa, you can go to Australia, you can even go to Texas, and you can go and see an NG15. Everybody knows what they look like. The one that I own, if I get to the stage where it's done, which hopefully I will do, will look the same as it did when it was new. This doesn't. This is a different thing. This involves an element of creativity and it's fun. So this is the R&AD wagon getting delivered to Sheffield. That's my old dog there, bless him. Welsh love narrow gauge. Absolute git of a dog, but love narrow gauge. So this is, I actually bought a pair of these. One of these is now at the Royal Armaments Railway, I think it's called. I donated it to them and it looks really nice in its original form. So I took this apart and again, learnt a lot while I was doing it, learnt a lot about how carriages are put together. So this is the chassis. This is my friend Colm driving a forklift truck that doesn't belong to him or me. And that's on its way to be shot blasted there. And then when it came back, it kind of looked like this. And this is it at work. And you can see R&AD wagons are kind of a really awkward proportion. And if I knew where I was going to end up, I wouldn't have started there. It would have just been a terrible idea, but I did. So here we are. And this is the point at which I realized the thing was just too short and wasn't going to be good enough for what I wanted and wasn't going to give me the internal space that I wanted, and also that it was too narrow. And one of the problems that I really came up against when I was designing this was I really struggled to find out how big things should be, because your perceptions of size are completely different when you're in a building. So like Ralph, for instance, behind me looks absolutely gigantic in here, and he is a big boy, but he weighs less than a Class 8, and everybody knows that Class 8s are small. So perception is in the eye of the beholder. A nice beauty shot of Ralph there. He is a big boy. So I realised that the chassis would have to be longer. So as I said earlier, I just like literally took an angle grinder to it, cut the thing in two, and I thought, well, it's either going to go okay or it isn't. And then I had to decide how wide to make it. So, and again, when no one knows who you are, it's really difficult to ask stupid, annoying questions of people who have a job to do, because they're like, why are you bothering me? You know, why are you in my house? That sort of thing. And so I had to kind of guess. And I did a lot of this from a picture of a Vale of Ride old brake van, which had some poor, and it turns out, inaccurate dimensions on it. So I got some steel and I stuck some bits on until it looked like it was about right. And I have a staircase at work, so I would go up the staircase and look down on it from above and think, oh, look okay. And when I decided that it looked all right, I welded it on and bolted bits to it. So me and Jen, who was here today, speak a lot about how you should design railway equipment and that you should have a good think about what's going to happen with it when it goes into use. So I built some override protection into this thing, not a huge amount, it hasn't got a huge amount of crush strength, but the balconies at the end are metal. And that's because I wanted it to be able to take a little bit of an impact if it was necessary for it to do so. Hopefully it won't be. But I also wanted to be able to put a fall plate in. I want you to be able to walk between this and the adjacent vehicle, because it really annoys me that lots of balcony carriages don't have that facility, and I want to be able to go to the loo if I need to, and there isn't room for a toilet in this carriage. So that was designed into it from the start, and at this point I was just kind of free-handing this, trying to decide how big things should be, what sort of proportions they should be. So this is making the end balconies. And I hadn't really made a huge amount of decisions about it other than what I broadly wanted it to look like. But once we'd set the size of the chassis, I stole some drawings for fall plates from someone at the Festiniog Railway who didn't know they were helping me, because I felt kind of weird about asking people things. And then started to make this. So this is the plan form of the carriage as it stands today, although I did make the ends slightly narrower in the end. So I made the chassis quite a lot wider. Too wide to go up the Festiniog Railway, it turns out, silly Maddie. And you can see the bits that I've messed with because they're red instead of grey. And then we got it to the stage where it needed a body, and I thought, yeah, it can't be harder. A bit of wood, you know, knock up some bits and bobs. So I had to go doing the ends of the carriage, so the bits where the balconies are going to be wood. So I got some wood, and I had to go at making them, and I was really bad at it. Like, not just a little bit bad, like breathtakingly bad. And I thought, I'm not doing that. I'm just not going to do it. I'm certainly not going to build an entire carriage. I'm going to be ashamed of it when I'm done. So I did the bits I absolutely had to do that I didn't want to pay someone else to do. Battery boxes, ends of the carriage, that sort of thing. And we got it all nice, painted it, decided on the colour. That took a bit of agonising, but we decided to go for Midland red because it's Midland red, you know. And then sent it away to Statfold. I hired Statfold for a day. This is at a point where I started to discover that there's loads of things in the world you can just do if you just ask people. I was like, can I borrow the railway for a day? And they were like, okay. So that was great. I had a lovely day out towing it round in circles and making sure that it actually worked. I'd installed air brakes at this point, and we did separation tests, runaway tests. We loaded it with about 2 tons of coal, which is the maximum possible load that you were going to be able to get in this thing, even if all your friends are really fat. And took it around at Statfold and made sure it went through point work okay, because it'd been re-gauged, made sure the brakes were okay, because I'd done all this, and I'm an engineer, but I'm not a railway engineer. So I wanted to make sure it was okay, and it was. I had a lovely day out in the sunshine. It was very pleasing. And then it came back to Sheffield. Did a bunch of other things to it, so I started installing intercarriage jumpers. These are actually European standard jumper cables for intercarriage jumpers. Don't buy those, they're really expensive, and you won't want to use them in the end because they're horrible to use. So it got to the stage where it was sort of pretty much a working carriage, except for the fact it had no body. Fit some lights to the end of it. These are Deutz tractor headlights from India, where they still make 1960s Deutz tractors, which I enamelled so they look kind of old, because I really wanted it to have lights. And it's got step lights as well. It's got beautiful little cast eyelid lights in the steps, so you can see what you're doing at night time. It's frequently night time in Wales, where this is going to spend a lot of its time. And then I got bored one day and I went to Holland, and I saw a carriage in the Dutch National Railway Museum, a model of a carriage, and it had these beautiful signs. I thought I'm going to steal those. They're going to look really nice on my carriage. But there was someone watching all the time, and so I had to make my own. So I took a picture of them and Googled Dutch enamel sign manufacturers, because I wanted this peculiar convex look that Dutch enamel signs have. And I found the people who made them for Nederlands Spoorwagen. And they were like, yeah, we can help you out with that, Maddie, don't worry. We know exactly the signs that you mean. I've got the colour charts for them here. And I was like, absolutely wicked. So they made me some of those and saved me from a night in a Dutch police cell. And then it went off to the Festiniog Railway, and they were kind enough to present me with a quote that didn't make me cry for longer than 2 to 3 working days. And they started building the body in hardwood. And this is mostly the work of Glyn and his team at Boston Lodge. Glyn, you'll know if you've ever watched a moving pictures video or if you ever met him in real life. Wonderful man, extraordinarily talented, very, very passionate, really knows his stuff and knows how to build a railway carriage that isn't awful. And if you've ever been to a railway that has awful carriages, you'll know what I mean. But this thing is just a work of absolute beauty. Far, far, far nicer than it needs to be or deserves to be or really should have been. But what, you know, again, we're here now, aren't we? So this is mostly made out of, I think, sapele, which is a substitute hardwood for teak, because try as I might, I couldn't find anywhere I could get any from. But it's absolutely beautiful. The work is stunning. The team at Boston Lodge are world class at this sort of thing, like truly world class. I don't think there's anywhere else in the world you could go and receive a better standard wooden carriage building. So this took us up to the start of this year. Progress on it has been relatively rapid, particularly bearing in mind that I have to pay the bills for the thing. So this is now a much bigger version of Jeremy's carriage from Richmond. Very similar in proportions, but just bigger in every direction. This is actually as big as a Welsh Island Railway carriage. If you've ever been in one of those, they're quite a large vehicle. Not as big as the Garretts that pull them, generally speaking, but still big. So really quite large inside. We worked out that we could, in luxury seat, I think 10 people, and we decided to lose 1 to 1.5 passengers to allow us to fit in the booze, which is very important to me. One corner, so one side over here will have a utilities cabinet in them that would control all the switch gear, that sort of thing, all the things for the heating, lights, that type of business. The other corner will have a face-away wet bar, which will have a chiller and glasses and all the things you need to ensure that you and your friends have as good a time as humanly possible. I can see we're getting on in time, so I'm going to try and hurry this up a little bit. Yeah, this is now at the stage where it's externally finished, so we're just going to skip over all of these pictures here. It is on Moving Pictures 105 if you want to see it in real life on a video. It's lined in gold, and it has drop light windows, and it is just a beautiful carriage. So this is it outside at Boston Lodge, with its 4 plates down. So this is fully compatible with Festiniog Railway and Welsh Highland Railway service stock, so you can put this in a service train and it will run with them perfectly happily, and you can walk through and go to the toilet, more importantly. And you can ride on the balcony, which you can't do on any other Festiniog or Welsh Highland Railway stock. So that's the Gym Palace. I hope Jen enjoyed that. We're going to try and smash through some things a little bit more quickly because I have just yapped about that, but it is a passion project. It's something I really like. Any questions so far? Anyone got anything that they want to ask? No one's put their hand up, so I'm going to say no for now. What we got after that? So Gym Palace, we're going to Nelly. We're going to go through Nelly very quickly. I actually really like Nelly. This is, again, one of those kind of weird things. I actually came across an Argentinian guy on the internet who had been in Buenos Aires when they were clearing out the old Orenstein and Koppel importers' offices. And this is Nelly's builder's picture. This actually appears in the Collection X book, credited as being from the Rampton collection. I got this from Argentina. So at some point it's also made its way into the Rampton collection. But this came from Argentina, and that is actually Nelly as brand new. And this is the sugar mill where Nelly worked. This was a like an order from the German catalogue town and sugar mill type arrangement. So everything came on the boat from Germany, and they just unrolled it, cut the trees down, and grew sugar. So these are, these factories could be in the Ruhr, they could be in the Saarland. They're, a normal German factory with normal German things, and it's kind of weird to see it out of context in Argentina. But that's the way it was done. This is one of Nelly's sisters. This is number 5, Nelly's number 7. At the mill with this dapper gentleman here who is, I believe, going to pick up his missus on his locomotive. I'm not really sure. That's what it looks like. I think he's going out for a dance. But yeah, cool looking things. They lasted for a really long time. They're really interesting, more interesting than I've got time to sort of go into now. But these, because Argentina was going through one of its periodic political and economical crises, they couldn't really afford diesel. And they had Porter in, who will all be familiar from making steam engines great again. He came in and did a number of efficiency improvements to these. Steam jets in the firebox, multi-jet blast pipes, streamlined steam passages, that sort of thing. Kind of only vaguely helped because they were kind of knackered by that point, but he did, and presumably the mill liked it because they kept them for another 15, 20 years after that. This again is one of Nelly's siblings, same sort of locomotive. And then not a huge amount's happened to Nelly other than strip down, because we found out the frames were so bad that the loco needed new frames. It was at Workshop X for a while, but didn't get as far as we would like for 2 reasons. One, the aforementioned frames, and 2, Matheran 740 turned up in the collection, which is in much better condition and just naturally took its place in the restoration queue. But yeah, we got Nelly completely stripped down. She's now flat packed, mostly in the workshop here. The boiler's over at Israel Newton's in Cromford. Bits of work have been happening here, so I think Claire's going to point the camera at the wheel sets, which are just behind me there. They were profiled at the Vale of Rydal. They actually managed to get a good profile out of those, which is incredible. And so various other bits are ready to go back in the locomotive, but we just don't, at the moment, have the time or the resources to devote to finishing the rest of that off. So that's pretty much where Nelly is now. There is a lot more to that, and I could have done 2 hours on that locomotive on its own. But we will smash onwards, and we'll go to Ralph next. So Ralph's a personal favourite. So this is the subject of many memes and discussions on the internet. And I think Claire's going to do a shot over to Ralph right now because he is behind us at the moment. So he looks kind of weird at the moment because he's not got his nose on. But hopefully you can see the picture of number 19 next to Ralph there on the web browser, and that's what Ralph should look like. Basically a boil-washed version of a General Electric U-boat, if you like your American diesel locomotives. So something like a U18, something like that, boil-washed down to an understandable size for British people. But very similar in proportions, very similar in design concept. So we have a pressurized long hood with filtration, very advanced at the time, something that General Motors hadn't gone for in their offering, something that really made General Electric stand out. The thing that really made General Electric stand out is they're a bank and you can get finance, and they would also deliver quickly. And as long as you had shop crews who were willing to put up with the kind of exigencies of owning General Electric product rather than General Motors product, you were going to get something good. And this is from a time when American locomotives were an order of magnitude more reliable than British-built ones. So we lost the chance to supply South Africa with diesel locomotives to the Americans because the Americans could provide what the South Africans wanted at a reasonable price, and they were also willing to finance cheaply on the dollar and take payment in all sorts of fun things that you might have lying around if you're a Southern African nation. And General Electric could cope with dealing in those things and was used to doing so in a way that we just weren't prepared to do after the war anymore. You paid us in gold, you paid us in sterling, or you paid us in dollars, or you got lost. And so a very difficult period for British locomotive design. But anyway, it gave us this thing, and this is wonderful. So the South Africans realised that whilst the Garretts and the NG15s were wonderful locomotives, they weren't terribly modern, and they were in the process of heavily dieselising the 3-foot 6-inch gauge network, buying a lot of locomotives from General Motors and General Electric, and these were just an adjunct to that, basically. Great things. I love them. I saw a picture of them on the internet once, and I was like, oh my God, I'd love to own one of those one day. And I could never really imagine how I did that. And as you heard earlier, you just walk up to people and say, oh, can I have that? And they're like, yeah, I guess. So we all love Ralph, and no one in their right mind would ever bring one to the UK, as any number of internet threads will tell you. And if you do it, everyone's going to be like, no, it won't fit through bridges. What are you going to do with it? And I'm like, I don't know. Why not? You know, it's fun. So we'll go down to the bottom. Hopefully this will load momentarily. So there isn't a huge amount of sort of prehistory with Ralph. You saw the picture of him at Sandstone. I think I might have got these in the wrong order. Yes, I did. So yeah, this is Ralph when he arrived. Well, he was leaving South Africa. South Africans were great. The shipping contractor that we used were fantastic, really went above and beyond. Everyone was really understanding and like generally did what I asked them to do when I asked them to do it. We had a couple of problems with it going through the port in Africa where there was a couple of attempts to sort of make it a more expensive process than it really needed to be, but nothing that I couldn't handle, nothing that was out of the way and made it more difficult than I could cope with. So yeah, it made its way over to the UK. This is it in the warehouse at Sandstone. So Mr. Mole, who owns Sandstone, took a lot of things, a bit like I have, I suppose, took a lot of things that were just in danger with no real idea of, I think, where they were going or what was going to happen to them. But there are a number of huge sheds like this at Sandstone that have just incredible collections of historic things in there. So that's just a collection of NGG16s over to the right there. Just a bunch of Garretts, like just loads of them. There's like 10 in there, I think. And I think they've got 3 or 4 operational ones. So just a vast quantity of locomotives that you're never going to need, but like, what are you going to do? You know, you either do that or you weigh them in. These 3'6" gauge sleeping carriages here, just beautiful things. Stunning inside, absolutely incredible. God knows what you'd do with them, but beautiful all the same. So that was Ralph getting extracted. And then he arrived in Sheffield and got put where he is right now. I didn't realise quite how close he was to not fitting through the door, and if I had realised, I don't think I'd have slept. But he only just fits through the door. There's about 7 or 8 millimetres to spare, no more than that. Allilees did the transport in the UK, and they were great as well. Really, really good. They had to build a railway line to get him into the building, and they were really understanding and you know, really, really good with me. And here's a picture for comparison purposes. That's Matheran 740 without its boiler on. 740 is a 20-ton locomotive. It's a big locomotive for narrow gauge, and just nothing in comparison to the size of the 91. Literally, it might as well not even be there. It's a huge locomotive. So lots of progress been made on restoration with Ralph. Because there's quite a lot of locomotive, it's kind of hard to see the progress compared to how much there is still to do. But I've started at the front, which is where the batteries live. When something goes back on the locomotive, it goes back on there to stay, with the exception of the builder's plates, which are just on there because they're pretty. So we're really starting at the nose end and working backwards. So we've got basically to the back of the cab at the moment. And then when the nose goes back on, the batteries will go back in, and we can actually put the locomotive back on internal power and see how much repair work there is to do on the electrical system. I have contact in America who can rewire these things. And I may well bring him over to do that when we get to that stage, because a lot of the wires have been cut and they're all black, so they all look the same. So yeah, that's sort of Ralph's early history, and then that's one of Ralph's siblings, which we're not particularly interested in right now. And then we started out doing some like investigation of the front end of the locomotive. Found out that a lot of bits were maybe had more damage in service than I really wanted. These are the horns here, which have been rebuilt here in the UK and sound great. And then we're putting the recess back in the side of the cab. So South African Railways let a contract that said how wide the locomotive could be. And General Electric made it to that, but they didn't allow for the fact, we've seen the horns in the mobile camera view there looking very pretty. General Electric didn't allow for the fact that South African Railways wanted to put plates on the side of the cab, and when they screwed the plates on the side of the cab, it put the locomotive over the maximum contract width. So General Electric, at their own cost, put recesses into the sides of the cab to allow the locomotive to stay within the loading gauge width, which I think is about 9 feet, about the width of, I think a little bit less than the width of a Mark 1 C1 loading gauge carriage, if you're into that type of business. So we've done a huge amount of work at the front, and even things like taking one of these bolts out, that can be like 4 or 5 hours work if it decides it wants to be a pain in the bum. And I try to save as much original material as I can. The pilot at both ends is going to get replaced completely. The Festiniog Railway have very kindly made new pilots for the locomotive. That's because in service, Ralph was converted to 3'6" gauge and had standard American Buckeye couplers installed, which destroyed all the original draft gear. And we want choppers so it can be compatible with things in the UK. Vast majority of UK narrow gauge is chopper compatible to a greater or lesser extent. So these are the CAD drawings from redoing that. These are the gauging studies to see which bridges it will demolish, which is most bridges, realistically speaking. Repair work on the cab roof. These things hit the roof of places a lot in South Africa, particularly in the chilling sheds at the port, which were designed to take garrets, not things this big, but they determined the maximum size of the locomotive. But buildings built on dock sides tend to move about quite a lot, so every now and again the building would just hit the locomotive, or vice versa. All 91s have that damage on the roof, pretty much, give or take. Cab work, found a lot of really interesting stuff, including, I found this particularly useful to me. I was having a really terrible evening trying to take the cab apart. I can apply for the wellness program at South African Railways if I want to. That was quite tempting at that exact moment in time. And a lot of things like stress relief and indigestion relief packets inside the control stand. So apparently South African drivers are constantly stressed. So a lot of strip down of the cab there. These are the parts at Boston Lodge for the pilot. That's the cooker, has a General Electric range in the cab, which is a wonderful little touch. And this is pretty much where we are today. So this is the new pilot assembly. So this is the front of the locomotive, the buffer beam to the more English people amongst us. And that's for the new coupler. That'll be an NGG29 style coupler, Welsh Island Railway coupler, that has a drop head to bring it down to the height that Charles Spooner awkwardly chose in 18 whenever, which is no good for modern locomotives, but it is where it is. So that's Ralph. Ralph's brilliant. Really looking forward to Ralph being done. I'm looking forward to hearing him run. I've driven 91s in Africa, and they are hilarious. They make a great noise. I highly recommend having a go. So yeah, that's Ralph. What have we got next on the list? I don't think we're going to bother particularly doing the wagons because they're going to take up unnecessary time and they're not desperately interesting. They're both at Bala, if you want to see them. They live at Llanuwchllyn in North Wales. They're down there. I actually volunteer at Bala. I'm a fireman there for my sins because I loathe firing quarry Hunslets. I'm 6 foot in flat shoes, 6'1"-ish, something like that. And quarry Hunslets were designed for use by one malnourished Welshman, not a normal-sized Englishman and a gigantic English woman. So very difficult for me. I have to fire from the outside of the locomotive, usually when it's moving. I have now clearance the loading gauge to the size of my bum at Bala. So the plants all have like a concave section taken out of them where I've been hanging out of the locomotive backwards firing it. So yeah, they live at Llanuwchllyn. Hopefully they'll be going into service at some point in the coming year. Weirdly, we had a really bad problem with spanners. The nuts that hold the couplings on the South African couplings are gigantic and require a very specific sort of spanner to remove them, which we've had to have manufactured. The Festiniog Railway, again, very kindly done that for us. So yeah, we're going to ignore the wagons, but you feel free to read about them on the website. If you have any questions or anything like that, you can ask me at the end here, or you can, there is a contact form on the website. You can always email and that will come directly to me. Next on the list is Carriage NG29. Now, again, this is a personal favourite of mine. This is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful vehicle, and it's absolutely packed with history. I've got no idea how I'm going to pay for this, but built at Cravens, just around the corner from where I am now. I can probably throw something into the Cravens works from here. For Natal Government Railways in 1910, lavishly appointed, very expensive carriage to build. Absolutely stunning interior. I can't make this picture bigger, unfortunately, but this is the linen for Natal Government Railways done by Cravens. And you can even see the depth of the padding on the seats. These things were very, very, very lavish indeed. They had a double drop light, so an external drop light and an internal drop light, the internal one being slatted. That means if your poor eyes were easily offended by what you might see outside, but it was a hot day, you could have the window down and you could have the sunshade up and you wouldn't need to gaze on whatever it was that was outside the carriage. Had a large guards compartment from new, and one of my favourite historical features of the carriage, which is just really interesting, tells you a lot about the period it was manufactured in. One is external features are made in stainless Sheffield steel, so something that we were all taught at school here to be very proud of. And the handrail down the side and the footboard down the side, constant for the length of the vehicle. That is because the ticket conductor was not allowed in the first class carriage. So when he was out there collecting tickets, he would be literally outside the vehicle. He was allowed to go in third class carriages, but he was not allowed to go inside a first class carriage. So he had to do his job from the outside whilst the vehicle was in motion. Again, difficult on a risk assessment form nowadays, but apparently quite acceptable at the time. This is joined by Leif Paxton. If you've not heard of him, he is pretty much the South African railway historian as far as we're concerned, particularly for the narrow gauge stuff. He's done a lot of work with Transnet, the Transnet Heritage Foundation, with Sandstone Estates, and with various other preservation organisations in South Africa. Has written a few books. Amazing person, very, very kind, been very kind to us here, has done a lot of work for us, has searched a lot of the South African Railway archives and done a lot of things that we just helped in ways that we just couldn't have done the things that we've done without. Ironically, the Craven's archive here in Sheffield is almost entirely useless. It's mostly composed of director's minutes, but I can get the full set of works drawings from South Africa via Leith Paxton. So make of that what you will about our attitude to history in Sheffield. But yeah, we do have a full set of works drawings for this carriage, and it is absolutely incredible. So we even have the cut glass for the partitions, show how they were appointed. And this is the carriage late in its life. So this is not super late, this is its second to last overhaul. It was overplated on the bottom with steel and received the standard South African Railways livery. It's still first class carriage at this point. It got made into an open carriage inside, and you can see the full length handrail and footboards in that picture. Ended up on the Apple Express, controversially came out of service, got used for spares recovery. This is its last livery. It wore this livery until the body came off, and was left to decay at Port Shepstone. Spares were recovered from it, and then it was just left to fall apart. The weather there is not particularly conducive to success if it's a wooden-bodied carriage. It's a very harsh environment. It's very hot, but it can also get very cold, and there's a lot of salt in the air and that sort of thing. It's a bit like Boston Lodge, but with more summer. So yeah, it eventually ended up in this condition, ended up at Sandstone, and they knocked the body down so that they could perform restoration work on it, and somebody burnt it. He was meant to be cutting up wood for locomotives for use in lighting up, and he went for the easiest thing he could find, which was NG29's body, which is very, very sad because that wood was original from 1910. But if that hadn't have happened, it wouldn't have been available to come back to the UK, and we wouldn't be able to enjoy it now. So could be a lot worse. So the carriage has had a lot of restoration work done. I'm going to try and just get down to that now without taking up too much else in the way of time. So the chassis has been shot blasted. It has a lot of wastage on it, but not as bad as you would think, bearing in mind how much time it spent outside by the sea. Some sections of the sole bar are getting replaced. We're having difficulty sourcing the correct narrow profile steel for that because the modern profile is wider. But it's going quite well. It's going all right. Some of the brass work has survived, which is really nice. So we still have the bogey oil pots, which I think Claire's going to go and find one of. There's one on the side of the carriage, and which is a brass thing. They looked absolutely appalling, and if you go back through the pictures on the website, you can see how bad they were when they came out of a field in South Africa. We have some in-house engineering skills here, and we actually made those nuts on the bottom of the oil pots in-house. They're a very unusual thread, presumably something that Cravens could just cut and were perfectly happy to do, but you certainly can't buy that sort of thing. The Cravens builder's plate there and part of the brake gear. So yeah, something's back on the chassis already. The new gussets are on top of the chassis there. You can just see those. And this is going to be the first hot riveting job that we do in-house. So I bought a forge for this. I've always kind of fancied having a go at hot riveting. It looks like a lot of fun. It has the correct amount of danger to keep me interested. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be really exciting. Again, big thanks to Dominic, one of the Festiniog Railways draftsmen. Great person, can't do enough to help the trust, and has done a huge amount of work for us completely free of charge. Just a wonderful person. He's designed the new draft gear, which will be, again, Festiniog Railway compatible, which is the industry standard as far as we're concerned. So I think somewhere in here we have some CAD drawings for that. And these are the bogey oil pots, again, up close, just beautiful. They've been in a field, you know, they just come out so nicely. These are the stencils for the sign writing on the chassis. But yeah, truly just a wonderful piece of history, and so nice to have it back in Sheffield where it belongs. It is going to be a long time until that's done, and that's mainly because of money. The body on that carriage is going to be an easy six-figure sum, very comfortably six figures. There's a lot of work in that, and there's a lot of wood in it, and just getting it to the point where it's 90% complete is only about a third of the cost, because then you've got a whole lot of green leather to buy and a lot of rubberized horsehair. And I don't know if you've ever tried to catch a rubberized horse, but it's really difficult. So that stuff's expensive. So that's NG29. Again, just a wonderful piece of history. After that, what have we got? We've got Matheran 740 and the NG15, and then we'll wrap up. We're going to try and smash through these as quickly as possible because I'm imagining a lot of people want to go to bed now. It's 9 o'clock. Matheran, really interesting locomotive. Again, read about it if you can. Came to the UK via a really interesting person called Mike Sato, which I'm sure most people or a lot of people are familiar with. He was head of ICI in India, and he was one of the really nice side of British colonialism, where and we get a bad rep, and justifiably so. We've done some awful things as a nation, but we also had a habit of going out places and going, do you know what? It's actually really good here, and like I can bring something here, and they can bring something to me. And Mike Sato was one of those people. He loved India. He loved India, and he loved the Indians, and more than anything else, he loved Indian railways, and that was recognised by the Indian government. And in return for the work that he did in retirement, he stayed in India after he retired. He didn't need to. He could have come back to the UK. And he helped found the Indian National Railway Museum, amongst other things. And they gifted, via the safe hands of Mike Sato, Matheran Light Railway 740 to the United Kingdom, to the people of Britain, in recognition of Mike Sato's work and in recognition of Britain's work, giving India one of its greatest assets. You know, it's not to take away from the Indians' ability to look after it now, because they're very good at that, but a really nice gesture and absolutely wonderful. And this, I think, out of everything that is in the Trust collection, is the one that I feel the most responsibility for. It's not had an easy life in the UK. It's suffered from some of the exigencies of railway preservation, some of the less great aspects of it maybe, where people don't always see eye to eye and they think they have the assets' best interests at heart, but sometimes maybe they don't. And this is really a clear example of how you don't own something. I don't own this. I'm just the person who's currently paying to keep the rain off it. But a lovely locomotive, really interesting. Maybe not the prettiest locomotive in the world, but this is it very early on. Interesting loco because it was ordered by everyone's second favourite narrow gauge railway consultant, Calthorpe, who did the Leakham Manifold Railway. Interesting guy, spent a lot of time in India earning his shekels, and this was one of the railways he was responsible for, and he gave very strict instructions to the Germans on how to build a locomotive. So these were ordered from Orenstein and Koppel. Flexible chassis design, like everything else that I own for some reason, not really sure why I did that. These are Klein Lindner or Haywood, depending on how many pints you've had and where you are in the argument. And these are designed to go around very, very sharp corners at full throttle, wide open regulator, at like 5 miles an hour. And there is a video of them with Mike Sato doing just that on YouTube. I highly recommend looking it up, and it's just wonderful. Have a look at that, you'll love it. This came to us via the South Tyndale Railway, and is now quite a way into its overhaul. Boilers at Israel Newton's. It's had a new backhead, work's progressing quite well with that, and this is where the chassis is at right now. Various new pins and trunnions have been made. The wheels are off at Sepcor in the East Midlands, getting profiled, yeah, it's coming on quite nicely. And that is 740 when it was in service at the Leighton Buzzard Railway. You can find out a lot about its history and the ins and outs of where it's been while it's been in the UK on the internet. It makes an interesting read, not something I'm going to go into here though. And then we have a final item in the collection, which is NG15-120. Again, NG15s, beautiful locomotives, I adore them. Oh, actually, I've forgotten an entire item from the collection, which is a Festiniog Railway barn carriage. We don't have time to go into that today. But yeah, interesting piece of stock. Can't believe I forgot about it. That's not here at the moment. It's at Dinas in Wales. But yeah, another one for another day. So 120. This, again, I ended up with by accident. It was owned by someone that was quite big in narrow gauge preservation, but very private, more so maybe than Collection X. And again, builder's photo there. Amazing how many builder's photos for the locomotives we've come across, but that is 120 in that picture. And that's it in service in South Africa. And that's it in Wales. And when this picture was taken, I was 15. I am not 15 anymore, I can tell you that much. So it's been in the UK a long time, and it's suffered as a result of that. There is a lot of corrosion damage to the journals, just to the locomotive in general. I'm looking at the one of the dome covers, or the manhole cover actually from the boiler. It's directly opposite me, and it looks like the moths have been at it. There's really not a huge amount of it left. It's the bit behind the bike. Don't know if you can see that on the camera view there. So it's just over lent against the wall behind that bicycle that's there. The moths really have been at that a lot. So we've been very fortunate again to benefit from Leith Paxton. He's managed to find some pictures of 120 in service. Just a great looking locomotive. Athletic, these things will do 50 miles an hour quite happily and still be stable. There are videos on YouTube from one of the Sandstone drivers, Mark Ruddy, of him pacing one in his Opel Kadett, and it's doing a fair clip. They're a fast locomotive, absolutely gorgeous things. So this is where we're at the moment. We're working on the pony trucks right now, painting lots and lots and lots of things. There are a lot of parts in an NG15, I can tell you that much. Some new parts have been manufactured for it, so we've got some enamel signs here. This is the catenary one, because these locomotives had to be serviced in areas where you would have overhead electrification, the 3 foot 6 inch gauge ones. So that's that. Pardon me, sorry. And this is the front pony truck, which is right behind me right now. That's I think you're looking at the rear one there. Probably got the front one just over here. And we've just managed to separate the wheel set from this. Getting the axle boxes to come out wasn't a particularly fun experience, but they've come out now. And that's where we're at. The boiler, the chassis, the frames, and the tender chassis are all in storage at another location, a secure location, because they're very big and they take up a lot of room and they don't need any work doing to them at the moment. So yeah, that's that. I've kind of sort of force-fed you the last 25 minutes of that because we were going to start running out of time really quickly. But I hope you found that broadly enjoyable. I think we'll maybe have a couple of questions and then go for a quick walk around before we wrap up, if that's okay with everyone. I don't know how we're feeling about that, Jeff.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just looking on the chat to see if there's any questions in there we haven't picked up. The actor was Kenneth Moore, apparently.
Ah.
Northwest Frontier, I think was the film I'm thinking about.
Great film, beautiful carriage.
Yeah.
If you've not seen it, highly recommend it. It's got some shooting a machine gun down a train. It's fantastic.
It starts off in India, doesn't it?
It does, yes, yeah.
Then suddenly it gets into something rather broader.
Yes.
No, I don't think there's any questions. Anybody got a question?
Feel free to ask away. I don't bite.
I'll ask one because it's the question probably people who want to know but are embarrassed to ask. With Ralph, how far have we managed to gauge it then from Boston Lodge?
He will go as far as the loop before Nantmore.
Ah, okay.
Um,
Further than I thought. Okay.
Depending on how committed you are. But yeah, he's lighter than a 158, as a lower axle loading than a 158, just. So he'll go across the network rail crossing without any real problems there. We have some concerns over a couple of the bridges. There's some structural assessment to do there. And his ability to fit through the Teletubby bridges, which if people don't know what they are, they're made of Armco. So they're circular and they look like the Teletubby house. And they're on the floodplain as you go across the flatlands away from Porthmadog towards the Aberglaslyn Pass. The clearance in there is quite tight. It's not prohibitively tight, but it's going to require some commitment, I think, and probably some bravery on the part of the driver. When Ralph is done, one of my good friends from South Africa, a chap called Gert, who was the chief engineer at Sandstone, he's going to come over because we need someone who's actually qualified to drive. He's going to come over and he's going to help us write the operator's manual for it and make sure that we can pass out some drivers on it that aren't going to, kill people and stuff. I can drive. I can drive all AAR stand locomotives, but I can drive 91s, but I'm not qualified to do so in the United Kingdom. So yeah, we're going to get Gert in, and he's going to show us the level of commitment required to go through a bridge that's only just bigger than the locomotive. Anybody else? Feel free to ask. I love talking about these things.
shock everyone into silence.
I mean, there's they had the wonderful tale of all the memes that appeared on the internet when the Class 91 appeared.
Yeah.
Didn't we?
I enjoyed that. I took a lot of pleasure from people being confused. And I also enjoyed occasionally posting things that weren't necessarily true on anonymous accounts, because that also gave me a huge amount of pleasure. I announced at one point anonymously that it was going to the Gartel Light Railway, and I don't know if people are familiar with that, but it is 2-foot gauge. It's on, I think, a bit of the Somerset and Dorset railway track bed, and Ralph would not fit there. It's a miniature railway. It would be hilarious to even try, and I would dearly love to take him there. So the website URL is darnall.org.uk. So Darnall. Oh, N-A-L-L? Have I spelt that correctly? I think so. If you Google Darnall Locomotive Trust, it will come up and it will correct any misspellings that I'm chronically dyslexic. I'm really sorry. Oh, it is written on the side of my forklift, so I'll get up and check the spelling for you. Just one second. Yes, Darnall. .org.uk. And I'll show you the forklift in a minute, because the forklift's better than everything else that we own. It's mostly me, yes. It wasn't really meant to get to this stage, and it got to this stage because I'd accidentally ended up owning all of this stuff. I literally only wanted a small diesel engine and a carriage. There's always the possibility it might grow from this. It's beyond what I can realistically manage on my own, and it's just a vast amount of work to fund this and to kind of do the physical work. And I think that's a conclusion that a lot of people come to when they do this sort of thing, that they suddenly realise that they're in way over their head. I'm quite tall, but not that tall. So yeah, I imagine there will be some development with that at some point. When that will be and how that will be, I don't know. I just turn up every day and do my best. I think someone just said, can we see 120? I haven't got most of the locomotive here, but we're going to do a walk around in a minute and you'll get to see lots of 120. By part number, probably 90% of it. By volume, probably 5%. But we do have a lot of the locomotive here and you'll be able to see that. There are a lot of really good pictures on the website of 120. Looking absolutely beautiful after it got shot blasted. If you want to feel good about a purchase, take it to the shot blasters, honestly. It'll transform your opinion of how stupid you were. Yeah. Oh, I saw that, yeah. I actually I was at the Doncaster Model Railway exhibition, I think earlier this year, and there was a chap there with a Welsh Pull and Llanfair Railway layout, and he had a 91. Highly recommend it. If I could afford to keep it 2-foot 6-inch gauge for a bit, because it's 3-foot 6 now, on the way to 2-foot, I'm sure we could make it 2-foot 6. I would love to take that up the bank. They make the most glorious noise, but unfortunately there's a limit to my practical joke budget now. Maybe I'll bring you an F45H. I think they are the Fowler locomotives. I adore those. I might bring you one of those one day. I've been offered a couple, and I'd love to hear that Maybach sing on the way up the bank. That would be wonderful. Did I miss any other questions?
No, I don't think so. I can't see anything else on the chat anyway.
I think it's now everyone and everything and everywhere. What's the formal aim of the trust? Yeah, that really, to keep the rain off stuff. So a lot of the things that are here, the people that had them had the best of intentions in the same way that we all do. I don't think I can think of a couple of people that did, but most people don't go into this with the idea of making money or self-aggrandizement. You do it because you think you should, that you think it's a good idea and that you think it's your duty to do it for whatever reason, misguided or otherwise. Part of it for me is self-amusement. I think it's funny. I think it's enjoyable. I enjoy doing engineering. I like to fix things. But most of it is really, it's absolutely selling it down right now. And all of this metal behind me is ferrous, give or take. And it would all be just falling into the ground without someone to look after it, and someone stupid enough to make themselves very poor by keeping the rain off, basically. So yeah, the trust's aim is to do that, to prolong the life of these machines and make it so someone else can enjoy them. And I, you know, I'm 44. I'm not going to be here forever. None of us are. So somebody's got to give them a leg up, and particularly with 740. 740 was in real danger in a way that it really shouldn't have been. And there was a lot of talk about how much it would cost to restore it, how much it would cost to overhaul it, and whether that was ever going to happen. And we have a demographic crisis in this industry, in this movement, where people are aging out of it, and you get to an age where maybe your healthcare costs, your living costs become far more important, and you're not running, if you have a business, you're fortunate enough to have your own business, and that was funding your hobby. It gets to a point, particularly with some of the people I've dealt with, where they age out of it and just need to concentrate on being alive rather than having the fun of dealing with something like this. From a meeting people point of view, I enjoy meeting people. I like to know people. I like to meet people, and I like to feel like I make a good impression when I meet people, and that's really important. Like, a bigger part of this has been it's not the locomotives, it's the people you meet on the way. I've enjoyed making the contacts that I've got. I've made some great friends all around the world doing this. I've been fortunate to combine some of the travel that I do with travel that I have to do for work. I work with and certainly used to work with one of the major car manufacturers, and they tend to have factories in countries that have got checkered political pasts. So that means that I get to go to a lot of these places, and a lot of these places have narrow gauge locomotives, particularly German ones. So I've been very fortunate from that point of view. Any other questions?
No, I think we've covered the questions for the moment. So,
okay.
Did you say you want to go?
We're going to have a quick walk around. Yeah, I think we're going to do the. So I'm sat behind. This is basically an industrial unit with a trade counter in it, and so I'm sat behind the trade counter at the moment, as you can see here. So we're going to go in front of the trade counter first. So most of the stuff in front of the trade counter, I won't be able to hear anyone, by the way, while I do this, because we're going to go away from the speakers. Most of the stuff in front of the trade counter is NG15 parts. So we have, right here, we have 120's front driving axle, and you can see how this is articulated here. So this driving axle has allowed a certain amount of movement with the front pony truck, which is just over there. And it has this large ball and socket joint on it here, and it has this cannon box here, which allows it to work in the way that it does. There's some really good diagrams on the internet of how an NG15 is articulated. Much more simple than a Garrett, much cheaper, much easier to operate. You don't have two of everything to look after. And one of the really interesting things about 120, and one of the things that really recommended it to myself and Ellie, who helped me do the assessment on it, is that these tyres date from 1976, and these are brand new. These are unworn tyres. They are at full thickness, and they still have machining marks in them. Absolutely incredible, worth far more than the locomotive is. Number 17, which I've driven in Africa, or I should say more correctly, actually, I've been on the footplate of whilst it's been driven, has worn out tyres, and that's a really difficult problem for Sandstone because of the cost of replacing the tyres on a locomotive that has this many wheels. So really important that it's got those. It had a comprehensive works overhaul in 1976 and had a lot of money spent on it at the time. And even though the locomotive is maybe not great now because it's in 1,000 pieces and it does have a lot of corrosion issues, this sort of thing is really important, and the boiler is good as well, and that's also important from a cost point of view. So we have all the bits of the locomotive down here. I don't know if Claire's going to be able to get to see them, but these are some parts that have been finished already. Front headlamp bracket over here, fire bars, grate supports, steam generator brackets. I'm stood on so I would be stood directly in front of the smoke box door right now if this was on the locomotive. This is the front foot plate, the vacuum brake bracket just here. Breakaway shaft, various other bits here. And then a lot of the other locomotives, or the smaller components, are all scattered out here. When it arrived, it was all in Ministry of Defence stillages. and it had been in them for a long, long time, since the 1990s. So everything has been pulled out, catalogued, assessed, sandblasted and primed, and then put into storage. And it gets pulled out as things become available for restoration. So directly below Claire at the moment, just down here, this red bit here, that's part of the reversing mechanism. And that is ready to go back on the locomotive. Kind of pointless at the moment because the locomotive isn't ready for it, but it is ready. And we've had a lot of design work done on things like, so we have the old cab sections here. These are going to get replaced, but they're here and they're sandblasted because they still contain some parts we're going to reuse, and it's far nicer to have them lying around the place like this than it is covered in rust and flaking everywhere. Just on the front of the counter here, you can see Ralph's new side windows. These were made for us here in the UK, and they're ready for installation in the locomotive when we get to the stage where it's ready for those. We're going to hop back over this way a little bit now. And over here we've got 120's reverser assembly. This is something that I've been working on recently, and this is about half done, give or take. It might be that the screw gets replaced here. This is in really, really good condition from a wear point of view, but it does have some pitting and it kind of doesn't look nice. But this is a beautiful, beautiful piece. It's so nice to see it come back from looking like it was in a pond to the state that it's in now. The cut-off scale can't be finally mounted until we know what the dimensions of the reverser assembly are going to be back on the locomotive. But it's all ready, and it works really, really well. I'm very pleased with that. This is 120's tender ladder. This is for the firemen to go up to water the locomotive. That's going to be one of the next things that gets worked on because that got gas axed off the locomotive in Wales. This is 120's middle driving wheel set. This is very, very, very heavy, far heavier than my forklift can safely lift. But this is pretty much ready to go for machining now. It has some protective paint on the journals and on the tyres, but that's in excellent condition, truly excellent condition. Again, brand new tyres, absolutely wonderful. As a brief aside, this is my Toyota forklift. This is the best machine I have ever purchased in my entire life. It has no safety cutouts on it. It is the hardest working piece of machinery I've ever owned. It's wonderful. Again, if you need a forklift, buy an early 90s Toyota. They're great. 120's leading wheel set behind us here. This has some corrosion damage, and it also had a hot box in South Africa. This is what caused the locomotive to be withdrawn. So we have some hot box damage to this journal and some corrosion damage. This may require weld build-up. It may require an axle. I'm not sure. It might come back with a turn, but we'll see. We'll see. Then we have NG29's chassis here, which you've seen in the pictures and you've also seen a little bit already. The new couplers are in there, but there's no draw gear at the moment. But this is coming along nicely. I'm very pleased with this. And then we have up on top there, we have a selection of NG15 and Arenstein and Koppel parts. That's 740's cab there. A variety of NG15 bits in between, and that is Nelly's cab over there, which is actually fully restored and ready to go back on the locomotive. Absolutely gorgeous, some wonderful work there by Al, our fabricator at work, who made the bell mounts and restored a boxing referee's bell that was donated to the trust by an extremely kind gentleman called Mike Linsky, who again is sadly no longer with us, but was from Workshop X in Killamarsh nearby, and a really nice gift from him. And we've had a lot of help with Nelly from the Frankfurter Feldbahn Museum in Germany. Absolutely wonderful people there. Again, superb, helped us with drawings, just in contacts in Germany, people who have the correct castings, or the correct patterns for things. Really, really wonderful. And again, people that we just can't thank enough for the amount of effort that they've put into help some people try and help some machines. Really wonderful. We're going to take a quick walk down the side of Ralph here. Some really nice work that's been done here, putting these back in, the recesses that were removed during Ralph's midlife overhaul. This number plate, cast for us in South Africa by the chap who does basically all of them. He has all of the original patterns. And then the builder's plate, Ralph had one of his original builder's plates left. That was replicated for us by Newton Replicas here in Northeast Derbyshire, just down the road. Again, great company if you need things like that making. They're very, very good at it. We can't, because it's not particularly safe, go up in Ralph at the moment, but you can see he's a big locomotive. Very, very normal North American practice for a locomotive design. So we've got a truck here that's very similar to what you might know as a Blomberg truck or a AAR standard road switcher truck. Big casting, great way to make bogies if you have your own foundry. Very, very, very standard American practice for the time. The only thing that's different really is that they offset the traction motors because there wasn't enough room to fit the General Electric traction motor into a 2-foot gauge bogie. So it has staggered traction motors and a gearbox. But apart from that, really, really normal. One of the interesting things about Ralph, and I think we're going to have a quick look at the engine while we're here. It doesn't actually have a General Electric engine. We've got the part of the engine and part of the generator there. General Electric make their own diesel engines. Nowadays you have the Evolution series, which is what you get if you ordered one today. And before that, they're the really well-known FDL series of engines, which is what most universal engines with locomotives were fitted with. This is a CAT, it's a D379, it's about 800 horsepower. It's a big turbocharged V8. You might find these in quarry dump trucks, things of that nature, anything that needs 800 horsepower, basically. But a big, big engine designed to be overhauled in the frame. You don't take one of these apart like you take a car engine apart. So pop those shut. And at the back here we have something really interesting, and this is something that I'm really looking forward to seeing working. These are dynamic brake resistors. So these turn the locomotive's traction motors into brakes, and they produce a huge amount of current, and that's dissipated through these resistor grids here. And if you ever see an American locomotive going downhill that's equipped with dynamic brakes, you'll see the heat haze come off them. And above there is a 6-foot diameter manually actuated fan, which is one of the things that's noisiest on the locomotive. It's actually slightly noisier than the engine under some operating regimes. So that's Ralph, and I think we have one more thing to show you, which is Nelly in her current state. Nelly's not particularly actively worked on right now because we've got 740 going through the overhaul process. But this is what looks like, what an O&K looks like if you turn it into an IKEA flat pack. So this is a flat packed Arenstein and Koppel 010. These are a well-tanked locomotive, and the Germans like to build their locomotives from thin steel and put the strength in the structure rather than in the plate work. So this is a box. And during its life in Argentina, they were worked very, very hard, and the Argentinians also cut the corners off the box for various reasons, and that made them very weak. So all of these locomotives have broke their backs to a greater or lesser extent. There is a lot of salvageable material in this, but also a lot of work, mostly in the drilling and the riveting, and in the draftsmanship, just the work that goes into actually preparing the drawings for the locomotive. So that's Nelly as she stands at the moment. You can just see the gearboxes behind us there. They're part of the Luttermöller system, and one-to-one gearing, just the same as a coupling rod, basically. They're not there to make it go faster or slower or to change the locomotive's torque characteristics like the gearbox in your car. They're literally just there to transmit power from one axle to another, the same as a coupling rod would. So that's about it. We're going to make our way very slowly back over to the counter so I can see you all again. And hopefully you enjoyed a little bit of a walkabout tour. It's kind of difficult because I can't see anybody's faces when I'm doing that, so I don't actually know if anyone's interested or not. But I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope you all liked it.